Hi again, this is Gloria Keith with you, and let's see if I'm better educated on this system here. Hopefully each day things will get better and not worse. I do want to read just a quote before we get started. Again, I'm Gloria Keith with Action Speaks Heritage Excellence Education Journal. And I'm here to continue to read the Black Man in America, 1932 through 1954 by Florence Jackson. And there are 90 pages. And maybe by the end of this month, we'll have all 90 pages read or enough to interest you. So you don't have to read, just tape it, and I'll be right there to read it for you. I want to share something with you. Hopefully it will enhance your interest in learning more about us as Black Americans. Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois wrote, "Hope, the responsibility for their own social regeneration unto the place large on foreign." I'm sorry, you all, this is a misprint. At any rate, Dr. Du Bois is sharing with us that our changes for the better or our own responsibility as a community. But he said that the responsibility of building or establishing our own communities, our own churches, our own schools, our own home, although it's largely placed upon us, we all know by living as long as we have, whether it's 2 or 3 years, that it takes money or power, which means ownership, so you can make the changes, so that we can make the changes that are necessary for us to continue to grow. And that's all I'm going to say on that at this time. Perhaps more later. All right, we stopped on page 21 of The Black Man in America, 1932 through 1954, Florence Jackson. As I stated before, I will share more information on Florence Jackson as an author after or at the end of this month, or the day that we finalize everything for this month. I shall continue to read. Aside from his ability, and we're talking about, what was that? Powell, and the things that Philip Randolph, and what was it? Yes, Adam Clayton Powell Jr. and A. Philip Randolph got involved in helping to make a change during the 1930s, and aside or before 1941, Aside from his ability to lead, Powell was a dashing figure. Both men and women were fascinated by his charm. Of course, we have some of those today that stand up and profess to be leaders of our community, or we choose them to be. And that's something I want us to never forget. We make our choices of who represent us, and that we should never fail, because if something comes about destructively, that's on us. If something comes about constructive, that is also upon us. So let's consider the things or the people that we choose to represent us. Okay? That's just my opinion. You don't have to accept that. You can do what you want in your own community. But I must say, in my home, there's a choice. In my school, there's a choice. With my children, there's a choice. And in my community, I try to be a good professional humanitarian and make a wise choice. The Bible tells us that when we make a judgment, make a righteous judgment, because that's what we want others to make on us, to make a righteous judgment. And that doesn't always happen, but we hope that when we do it, that others will also. Like, for instance, right now, for some reason, it could be the lighting. I'm getting two different colors on this camera, webcam. I am going to be getting better materials and equipment to use as I grow in this. I'm still in school on this new technology equipment, but I don't mind. To make things better for you, I must make things better for me. So let's start this paragraph again. Aside from his ability to lead, Powell was a dashing figure. We all know what that means. The women do anyway. Both men and women were fascinated by his charm. Although he was very light complexion, as I say, I am, as my mother was also, and often mistaken for white, as my mother was also. And Powell identified with the masses of Black people. Amen to that. His home was always open to those who wish to speak to him. Even though he represented no particular party during the early part of his career, Powell was soon the leading political figure in Harlem. And of course, most Blacks in New York know about that. Hopefully, a lot of the Southerners will know more after we finish this book. He was also the leader of economic reform and pastor of the largest and wealthiest Baptist church in Harlem. In 1941, Powell made the startling announcement to his congregation that he planned to run for a seat on the city council. There were already 3 other well-known Black men in the race: Dr. Channing H. Tobias, Dr. Max Yergin, and Herman Stout. Powell persuaded Tobias and Yergin to drop out, leaving only Herman Stout. Then he organized an impressive group of both black and white sponsors for his campaign. In addition, the American Labor Party, along with the Republican and the Fusion parties, gave their support to Powell. Even the mayor of the city of New York, Fiorella LaGuardia, supported Powell, as in LaGuardia Airport. Powell was a vigorous campaigner, and he promised to get jobs for blacks. Powell won a council seat with the third highest number of votes in the election, including a large white liberal vote. These results were an inspiration for future political ambitions. In 1944, Powell ran for a seat in the House of Representatives and won. He attracted a great deal of attention in Washington. Almost immediately, Powell became known as Mr. Civil Rights. He forced the integration of segregated facilities in Congress, including the congressional dining room, showers, and barber shops. Powell also fought to end discrimination in the armed forces around the world. He sponsored legislation to provide federal aid. I missed the page. Federal aid to education. Let me show you how he looked. Okay, I hope you can see him. Hope I didn't hold it up too high. I'll put it at 3 different levels for you. And hopefully you get a good look. But you can also you will definitely find his picture and more information about him online, or go to the Library of Congress and look up his name. Education benefits for the unemployed and a minimal wage scale. See, I told you, so a lot in here that relates to what's going on today. And hopefully you learn something. You can go back and reread what you have taped or recorded from this reading, and you will see how much alike we are in times. During these early years of his political career, he was the most powerful black man in both Harlem and the nation. But he always came back to New York on weekends to preach in his church and to maintain contact with the congregation and the rest of the Harlem community. War and discrimination. By 1939, a second world war was raging in Europe. In January of 1938, President Roosevelt called upon Congress to enlarge the defense budget for purpose of national security. The new budget was to provide for the manufacture of national security, of war equipment, and at the same time to increase the number of available jobs. In 1940, a Selective Service Act was passed. Men would be drafted into the armed forces. An amendment to the act forbade discrimination in both drafting and training. I'm sorry, please forgive me for that phone. Some draft boards, however, called only whites, claiming there was no housing available for blacks. Black leaders such as A. Philip Randolph, Walter White, and Arnold Hill protested the discrimination practiced by local draft boards. In September 1940, they presented President Roosevelt with a 7-point program calling for fair treatment of blacks in the nation's defense program. The 7-point program. 1. Appoint blacks to work on draft boards. 2. Give black draftees the same training as whites. 3. Use available reserve officers to train new draftees. 4. Accept black draftees and officers into units based on their abilities and not race. 5. Integrate blacks with special training such as doctors, nurses, and dentists. 6. End discrimination in the Navy and Air Force. 7. Appoint blacks as assistants to the Secretaries of War and Navy. 7 is complete. The War Department finally issued a statement announcing that blacks would be admitted into the Army in a number based on the proportions of blacks in the United States. Moreover, a few black officers were promoted to higher positions. Colonel Benjamin O. Davis, and of course these are whites, these are nurses that were marching off to the Second War. Hopefully you see that. Yeah. Colonel Benjamin O. Davis became the first black general, and William H. Hasty was appointed civilian aide to the Secretary of War. Colonel Campbell Johnson was made an executive assistant to the director of the Selective Service, but blacks and whites continued to be separated. In fact, it seemed as though there were going to be separate white and black armies. In civilian life, the government did try to discourage discrimination. The National Defense Advisory Committee denounced the failure to hire blacks in defense industries. Training programs for defense jobs that used federal funds were told not to refuse admission to anyone because of race, color, or religious beliefs. Even President Roosevelt spoke out against discrimination in a message to Congress in September 1940. But these actions did little, if anything, to improve the situation. Of course, we can see that it yet exists. In January 1941, A. Philip Randolph said that the government would not act to help Negroes until it saw 10, 20, 50,000 Negroes on the White House lawn. Black leaders agreed with Randolph and began organizing a rally to be held in Washington, D.C. Bayard Rustin, a young Black leader who volunteered his services for the march, became the youth organizer. In June 1941, an announcement was made that thousands of Black people would hold a rally in the Capitol on July 1st. The purpose of the rally was to demand an end to discrimination in defense industries and the armed forces. Almost immediately, the rally became known as the March on Washington. Government officials became alarmed at the idea of thousands of Blacks marching on the Capitol. Even the President and Mrs. Roosevelt thought that the march would not help Black people. The President called Randolph to Washington to urge him to call off the march. When Randolph refused, the President promised to issue an order that would forbid discrimination in government and in defense industries. On June 25, 1941, President Roosevelt issued Executive Order 8802, which stated, "There shall be no discrimination in the employment of workers in defense industries or government because of race, creed, color, or national origin." The order came less than 1 week before the scheduled march. There seemed to be little need for a rally now, so the March on Washington was canceled. Black people and some whites praised the president's order. Other whites, especially Southerners, were against it. They did not want to hire Blacks or to integrate in any way, so discrimination continued. A young Black man realized that even though he disliked discrimination, he and other Blacks supported Jim Crow by sitting in segregated sections of theaters. He decided to do something about the situation. In the spring of 1942, James Farmer circulated a message calling for the establishment of a group of people who would work to end discrimination through nonviolence, direct action. A group of interested persons, many of whom were University of Chicago students, was formed. One Sunday afternoon, the group was refused coffee at a restaurant some distance from the university campus. When their attempts to reason with the management failed, the group decided to try direct action. The sit-in they organized made the owners decide to serve blacks. Thus, the first chapter of the Congress of Racial Equality Corps was formed. Additional chapters were organized on other college campuses. The first ones were located in the North, where many public accommodations, such as restaurants, barbershops, and recreational facilities, refused blacks. Black men were able to serve in many branches of the armed forces. They were in the Army, Navy, Air Force, and later, during the war, the Marines. A large number joined the Merchant Marines. Black women joined the Women's Auxiliary Corps, Army, and the Waves, Navy. But blacks had been and still were forced to bear many different types of insults and direct discrimination. For example, in the Navy, black sailors had to do housekeeping and other jobs that made them servants. But black men had proven and continued to prove that they would defend their country. On December 7th, 1941 at Pearl Harbor, Dory Miller, messman aboard the USS Arizona, manned a machine gun and brought down 4 Japanese planes. He was awarded the Navy Cross for his bravery, but he died in action 2 years later on the aircraft carrier Liscome Bay. Entertainment facilities were often segregated. At times, white servicemen were allowed to board buses while black men were forced to wait. Black newspapers were burned at some military posts, and the segregated stores for military personnel often sold inferior merchandise to black servicemen. At home, black servicemen and women continued to experience discrimination and hostile treatment from whites. In the South, black servicemen were refused service in places where German prisoners of the war were being accommodated. Others were injured by whites, who usually got off with little or no penalties. The injustices were widely publicized in newspapers. Black leaders protested. Finally, on July 8, 1944, the War Department responded by issuing an order that forbade segregation in Army transportation and recreation facilities. Some armed forces posts enforced the order, but many did not. In spite of unjust treatment, about 1 million black servicemen and women continued to serve their country and to fight for a free world. Other Black Americans contributed to the war efforts at home. Here is Sailor Dory Miller being honored on board ship and later speaking to the press. This is a picture, and I hope you can see it. If not, look it up and look up more information on them for your children and for yourself. All right, that's all we're going to read today. And tomorrow, or the next day of reading, we will start on page 31. And we'll talk a little bit about Dr. Charles Drew. Okay, and more. I like this little book. And of course, it's going to take a few days to read it to you. If I had it, I probably would read, if I had to, or if I just wanted to, I'd read the whole thing in one day, which I've probably done already, but I want to share this information with you. I think you'll be able to respect what's in the book. And if you have questions, I hope you will consider to contact me at my website, Action Speaks, gjhk2021.com, or you can email me at actionspeaks1980@gmail.com. May God bless you and continue to have a great Sunday, or whatever day you choose to watch this video. Enjoy your day. Thank you. God bless you.